Black America, listen to me. I speak to you from the heart of Africa, from a land that refused to kneel. You were told your heroes were gone, that Malcolm X was a chapter that ended in blood and silence, but his question still burns. Will black people ever control their own destiny? I am not Malcolm. I am a soldier from Burkina Faso, yet his spirit walks beside me every time I face the flags of old empires. They call me unpredictable, dangerous, a leader America can't control. Why? Because like Malcolm, I refuse to ask permission to be free. You marched for Black Lives Matter. You watched elections, commissions, speeches, but the police sirens still scream, and the banks still own your tomorrow. Here in Africa, we chose another road. We removed foreign troops, built our own alliance, our own currency, our own voice. I will tell you why the system fears Malcolm's legacy, reborn in Africa, and why that matters for every black child in America. When I was a young cadet in Burkina Faso, far from Harlem, far from the streets where you marched for Black Lives Matter, a friend handed me an old book. On the cover, one man, glasses, sharp gaze, fist of words raised against an empire, the autobiography of Malcolm X. I opened it and felt Africa speaking back to me through an African-American voice. Malcolm talked about colonizers abroad and oppressors at home as two heads of the same beast. He said, "You can't separate the African struggle from the black struggle in America." That line never left me. In Ouagadougou, I saw his warnings in real time. Foreign soldiers on our soil, our gold shipped away, our presidents begging for aid while our people starved. Different flag, same system. I realized if Malcolm had lived, he would have looked to Africa not as a symbol, but as a battlefield for real black power. Ask yourself, Black America, why do some black voices get celebrated on US television while others get buried or demonized? You are allowed heroes who fit inside the system, who speak of patience, voting, panels, reforms. But Malcolm X, they froze him in history as an angry radical, then told you his time had passed. They rarely show you his evolution, his global vision, his trip to Africa, his meeting with revolutionaries who talked of land, resources, and sovereignty. Power is not afraid of pain, it is afraid of independence. A black person who still depends on the same institutions that oppress them is not truly feared. A black leader who controls territory, resources, soldiers, and economic direction. That is different. This is why, when a young captain in Burkina Faso removes foreign troops, rejects imposed currencies, and talks directly to the African diaspora, alarm bells ring. I stepped from protest talk into power talk. That is the line Malcolm was walking toward. That is the line the system never wants crossed again. In America, you marched. You chanted, "No justice, no peace." You filmed the police. You shared the videos. You watched trials. Some officers were punished. Many were not. The system stayed intact. Here, in Burkina Faso, our struggle looked different but connected. We had foreign soldiers on our land, corporations digging our gold, and leaders who smiled for cameras while signing away our future. People protested, begged, petitioned. Still, nothing changed. There comes a moment when you realize the problem is not only bad people inside the system, the problem is who owns the system. Malcolm understood this when he spoke about land and power. Without control over territory, over resources, over security, you are always begging. So we stopped begging. We took power. We ended the old regime, rewrote our alliances, told France and others, "Your era here is over." That is not a march, that is a move. And when black people anywhere stop asking and start building, the world power structure feels the ground shake. Some of you first saw my name not on African news, but in a quick clip on your phones. Burkina Faso expels French troops. Young captain defies Paris. A few seconds, a few subtitles, and then the algorithm dragged you to something else. But those seconds carried a message, a black leader from a small African country telling a historic empire, no. No to military bases, no to stolen gold, no to puppet agreements signed in secret. In a world where many leaders bow, simple refusal looks like rebellion. Then you heard more, that we joined with Mali and Niger, that we formed the alliance of Sahel states, that we started speaking with Russia, with other powers, on our own terms. Some of you commented, "He reminds me of Sankara," even Malcolm. Others asked, "How long before America and its friends try to remove him?" When a black leader moves from speeches to alliances and armies, he becomes harder to control, harder to ignore, and more dangerous to any system built on obedience. Malcolm X was killed before he could fully test his new strategy. linking Black America's fight with Africa's liberation in a concrete way. He began visiting this continent, meeting leaders, studying how control over land and resources changes the conversation. Then bullets ended that journey. Decades later, I stand in a reality he was only beginning to touch. I sit in a presidency where the phone calls come from Washington, Paris, Moscow, Beijing. I sign or refuse documents that decide whether foreign soldiers stay or go, whether gold leaves our ground or remains for our children. This is not theory. It is daily pressure. When I say no to certain deals, I know I am not just disturbing one country's interest. I am disturbing networks that reach right back into Wall Street, into oil companies, into the same structures that shape life for Black Americans in poor neighborhoods. That is why the comparison to Malcolm is not flattery. It is warning. A Black man with a platform is one thing. A Black man with a state behind him is another. In politics, they rarely say, "We must control this Black leader" out loud. They use softer words: stability, democracy, partnership, counterterrorism. Behind these words, there is one question: will he obey the existing order or not? When I reject military bases, question old mining contracts, or speak of new currencies and alliances, some in powerful capitals hear only one thing: disobedience. Suddenly, think tanks write reports calling me populist, authoritarian, too close to Russia. Media pieces appear, not to understand our reality, but to frame me for their audience. Understand this, Black America: the same machine that once labeled your strongest voices extremists now labels African leaders dangerous when we act independently. The language changes, the targets shift, but the fear is the same, of Black people managing their own security, money, and destiny. To be a Black leader, America can't control, is not a slogan. It is a daily accusation whispered in rooms where decisions are made about sanctions, support, and stories told about you. Many of you in the United States only meet me through a screen, maybe a 30-second clip on a news channel, or a short video on social media with dramatic music and captions already telling you what to think. One day I am portrayed as a young revolutionary, the next as a strong man who might bring instability. They show you my uniform, my speeches, but rarely my people, the mothers at rallies, the workers in mines, the youth who say, "For once, someone is speaking the language of dignity." You are used to this pattern. They once did it to Malcolm, to Martin, to the Panthers. Praise when you are safe, attack when you threaten real power. The same logic is exported to Africa. Reward the leaders who obey, isolate those who don't. So when you hear that I am a man America can't control, understand that you are not just hearing rumor. You are hearing the echo of a long history where any Black insistence on full independence is treated as a danger to be managed, not a voice to be respected. Black America, you might ask, what does a president in Burkina Faso have to do with my life in Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore, the Bronx? More than you think. The same economic system that drains Africa's gold, oil, and uranium also shapes the housing loans, food prices, and job markets in your neighborhoods. When our resources are undervalued, when our governments are pressured into unfair deals, the profits strengthen institutions that rarely serve you fairly back home. Malcolm saw this early. He spoke about the ghetto and the colony as two reflections of one world order. When I reject unfair contracts, when I push for African control over our wealth, I am hitting the same network that profits from your poverty and your fear. So when you watch my speeches on your phones, do not see them as a distant show from over there. See them as another front line in a shared struggle. Black people demanding the right to live with dignity without asking permission from anyone. In your country, they put Martin Luther King Jr. on posters, name streets after him, play small clips of his speeches every January. But how often do they play Malcolm's full message? How often do they talk about his warnings on imperialism, on media control, on economic power? Power chooses which Black voices become acceptable. It turns some into symbols of patience and forgiveness, while erasing or softening those who talk about ownership and self-defense. A similar process happens with African leaders. The ones who sign what they are told become partners. The ones who refuse become problems. I am not interested in being a safe symbol. Neither was Malcolm. We were not created to decorate someone else's story. We were born to write our own. When they say Traore is too radical, they are not just talking about my words. They are reacting to a Black nation deciding to take back its army, its resources, its alliances. They are reacting to the possibility that you, watching in America, might be inspired by that courage. To be a black leader America can't control does not mean hating America. It means refusing to let any foreign power decide our future. It means saying, we will work with you if it serves our people, not because we are afraid to say no. There are times I agree with Western countries on security or humanitarian aid. There are other times I look them in the eye and reject their proposals. The difference is simple. I answer first to the children of Burkina Faso, not to any capital outside Africa. That is what true independence looks like. For you, Black America, uncontrollable might mean refusing to let parties, corporations, or media personalities define your dreams. It might mean building your own institutions, your own businesses, your own links to Africa that do not pass through anyone's filter. Malcolm tried to move you toward that level of self-determination. My life is proof that when a black person finally reaches that point, the system's smile fades and its fear appears. To the young black man scrolling this on a cracked phone screen, to the young black woman juggling school, work, and worry, I am speaking to you. You were born into a world that tells you your value, but tries to cap your power. Some of you feel abandoned by politicians, exhausted by promises, suspicious of every slogan. You see Black Lives Matter signs fade while the same sirens echo at night. You watch influencers debate your pain for views, but your rent still rises. Hear me. You are not powerless, and you are not alone. When we, in Burkina Faso, reject exploitation, we are not just acting for ourselves. We are opening a door for you to imagine something beyond survival, ownership, partnership, a real connection with a continent that is not just ancestry, but strategy. Malcolm wanted you to think internationally, to see yourself as part of a global black nation. My leadership is one small answer to that call. The question is, will you stay spectators or become partners in this wider struggle for dignity? I am not asking you to worship me. I am not asking you to see Ibrahim Traoré as a flawless hero. Malcolm warned against blind faith in any man. What I ask is simpler and more powerful. Question the story you have been told about Africa, about black power, about which leaders are good and which are dangerous. When you see headlines about me, ask, who wrote this? What interests do they protect? What are they afraid I might inspire in you? I want you to study, not just scroll. Learn about Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, the Sahel Alliance, the way we are trying to stand without leaning on former colonizers. Compare that to the advice you are given in America about how to be respectable and safe. If our example pushes you to demand more control over your own communities, your own economics, your own history, then their fear of uncontrollable black leaders will have come true, not because of me alone, but because of what awakens inside you. Understand this clearly. Choosing to be a black leader America can't control comes with danger. My life has been threatened. Plots have been whispered. Pressure comes through economic tools, international institutions, media narratives. The goal is never just to remove one man. It is to send a message. Do not follow this path. But there is also a promise greater than the risk. When a people see that fear does not stop you, something breaks inside their own chains. In Burkina Faso, ordinary citizens began to speak louder, to demand better, to believe that we could resist and still stand. That is worth more than my comfort. You in Black America face different weapons: mass incarceration, economic traps, cultural manipulation. But the objective is similar. Keep your power fragmented, your hope limited, your heroes manageable. When you connect your struggle with ours, you break that design. The risk is real. So is the possibility that our shared courage can redraw the map of what black freedom looks like in this century. Malcolm X did not live to see an Africa that could answer him. He dreamed of a global black unity that was more than speeches, a unity of power, of territory, of decision. His life was cut short, but his question remained. Will black people anywhere ever truly own their future? Today, in this small country called Burkina Faso, I carry a piece of that unanswered question. When I stand before foreign powers and say, we will choose our own path, it is not only Burkina speaking. It is every ancestor who refused the ship, every slave who rebelled, every worker who struck, every activist who marched, every voice from Harlem to Johannesburg that refused to accept humiliation as destiny. But this story cannot end with me. I am a chapter, not the book. The real continuation is you, black youth in America, in Europe, in the Caribbean, watching this right now. From Malcolm X to Traore is not a line of perfection, it is a signal. The next step is yours. Will you stay where the system can predict you, or will you become the generation it can no longer control? Black America, if my voice reaches you tonight, let it do more than entertain you. Let it disturb what you thought was possible. You were told Africa is a charity case, not a power. You were told your heroes belong in documentaries, not in real strategy. You were told to vote, to wait, to hope. while others quietly owned your labor, your streets, your image. Look at me, a soldier from a country most maps used to ignore. Look at what happens when even one small nation stops asking permission. Foreign bases leave. Old contracts are questioned. New alliances are born. Our children walk a little taller. Imagine millions of you doing the same where you stand, not as copy of me, not as copy of Malcolm, but as your own chapter of the same resistance. Organizing your blocks, controlling your money, teaching your real history, connecting directly with Africa without anyone in the middle. They say I am a black leader. America can't control. Good. But the real fear, the fear they never admit, is that you will stop being controlled too. When that day comes, when the streets of Detroit, Atlanta, Houston, and the townships of Africa move with one understanding, the world order that keeps us divided will not just tremble, it will change. Until then, remember this: Malcolm was the question, I am only one answer, and you are the decision.